I'm going to talk about the time that I was fired from my job and I became homeless, and what I learned from that experience that changed my life forever. Let's get started. Okay, so really quick, I just want to thank Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and if you like learning and you like this channel and you want to help out and make sure that future videos like this one get made, take a second to click the link below this video and you'll get instant access to Skillshare's learning platform for free for 2 months. So not only will you get access to all of their classes, which are hundreds of them, you'll specifically be able to find all the information you need on very niche topics that us as creatives love to get into. Whether it is how to use a camera or more the technical side, such as how a camera sensor works or how to get that perfect shot, everything you need to know is in there, as well as how to learn compositing, such as with After Effects or many of the other compositing software on the platform. In addition, you better learn Max, Maya, Houdini, every single 3D tool that you can imagine. I'm a big fan of learning just in time rather than just in case. So in other words, I want to have instant access to the information that I need at that specific time. So I love being able to log into Skillshare and have access to all of their classes and be able to find exactly what I need when I need it, and then be able to get back to what I'm doing right away. So, like I said, if you want to take advantage of this offer, click the link below this video to get instant access to Skillshare's premium level membership for 2 free months. So take advantage of this offer by clicking the link below right now. And thanks for supporting this channel. So you might have noticed that I haven't been posting on social or being really active for the last couple of months, and a huge part of that is because when COVID happened, I just kind of took a step back from everything, and I think that that's affected us all in different ways. I've recently lost a couple of close friends and people I care about, and it's been a bit rough, and I've just kind of been in a situation where I didn't really want to force creativity, and if anything, I just wanted to spend time with those that I care about and really just take a step back from everything. Now, I'm going to share a video here that I actually recorded about a year ago, and I chose not to post it because I felt it was a little too personal. It was something that for me is still a pretty vulnerable topic, but I know that the message behind it was something that I think that we all can gain from. It definitely has been such a transformative experience for me that the underlying principles of what I'm going to tell you about have allowed me to get a lot more success and really kind of prevent myself from ever repeating the same mistakes that I had in the past. Now, this is something that happened to me when I was about 16 years old, and it doesn't sound too bad now, but at the time, it definitely was. It was something that really affected me in a lot of ways, just having never really been on my own before, and then putting myself in a pretty vulnerable situation of losing my job, which I had moved to the other side of the country to actually take, as well as losing the place that I lived, not having any money, not having a way to get home back to where I was from, and just being really young and kind of thrown into that situation where I spent a few days homeless and just no idea really what to do. So like I said, the reason I am sharing this is because I do think that there's a lot to learn from the underlying message at the end of all this, and I hope that it's something that might help you and hopefully get something from it. Now, I shot this in one take, but I've trimmed it down just to kind of keep the pacing a lot better. And one last thing I'll just throw in there is that kind of part of the reason I am posting this is because I'm coming back up for air. I'm going to be starting to post again pretty regularly moving forward. I'm actually doing 5 hours of streaming with all my students at the moment. We've done a career intensive earlier today. I'm doing another one in about an hour's time. So I'm starting to get back in a rhythm again, and there's a lot that I want to share, but at the same time, like I said, it's been for me at the time to kind of take a step back, and I don't regret it. It's, I think, been a pretty healthy thing for me to do, but I also want to help everyone else, especially now, given all the shifts we've had. I think there's a lot of opportunities for us, and moving forward, I'm really excited to kind of see where that goes. So let's watch the video. I've thought about doing this video for many years, or I wanted to do it as a podcast for many years, and at the same time I really didn't want to do it, and I just now was thinking, well, if I were to do it, let me make some notes. And I'm like, you know what, fuck all that. I'm just going to say it and get it all out there. And this is a time when I was, I think, 16 years old. I got my first real big job, and I moved to the other side of Australia by myself, didn't really know anyone. I ended up getting fired. It's the only time I've ever been fired, and I also was homeless at the same time, and I had no money, and I was trapped in another city with no one to turn to and no way of really knowing how to get home or even where I was going to sleep. And obviously, for me, like I've never really told the story. I've mentioned it in passing, but I've never really told it because it's not a fun one for me. And at the same time, like looking back, there's a lot of things I could have done being a grown adult now to get myself out of the situation. But at the time, I didn't really know any better. The key thing is like what I want to get across is a couple of things. One is that I was in Brisbane, which is like north, east coast of Australia. Melbourne is down the bottom, east coast. So it's about 3,000 kilometers away. I might be wrong on my geography and someone can correct me. It's at 2,000 or 3,000 kilometers away. And for me, I'd been offered a job in Sydney, Australia, working for a studio that I really loved, and I really wanted to do that job. But being 16, I'd been paying rent, living with my mum since I was about 14, but I'd always been living with my mum. And moving to another city seemed very intimidating. So I felt like I wasn't quite ready to do that. And what ended up happening is that I got offered a job in Melbourne, which is even further away, working in video games, which at the time didn't really interest me because I'd already been doing video games and I wanted to start moving into film. That was the long-term goal, TV then film. I ended up getting offered this job, and I ended up taking that job, the job that I didn't even want, over the job in Sydney because there was somebody that I knew online who worked in video games in Melbourne, and he said I could sleep on his couch. So I ended up taking that job, and I want to mention that for a second because I think that this is really relevant, that we are in situations where occasionally we'll do something because it's easier. Like there's an excuse behind it. So the thing that we don't want to do, we make a decision against doing the thing that really benefits us because stupid excuse. I think that there's a lot of situations where we could go take our dream job and everything would fall into place, but we're like, I'm going to stick here because rent's a bit cheaper. And whatever the invisible script is you're telling yourself that is derailing you from success. So looking back, I could have moved to Sydney at 16. I could have started, jump-starting my career. I could have been so fulfilled and happy, but I decided, I know someone I can sleep on his couch in this city, so I'll go there instead, which is really dumb. But I want you to think about that because I want you to think about what irrational excuses you make that fight off the success that you could be having, okay, the opportunities that you could be having. So I turned down the job that I wanted in Sydney, and I moved to Melbourne, and I was sleeping on this guy's couch, and he had his girlfriend living with him and his roommate. Now, instantly, his roommate wanted me gone because I guess his ritual at the end of the night, he comes back from university and he watches porn on the TV on the couch, and obviously he can't do that if I'm sleeping on the couch. So within a couple of days, he's very aggravated and kind of wanted me out of the picture. So fast forward, like I started getting pressure right away, like go find a house, go find an apartment. It doesn't really matter about getting into the details. Basically, I was trying to find a roommate. Again, this is irrational for me. I could have just found an apartment, solved the situation, but I was looking for a roommate. Problem is that being 16 years old, nobody wants a 16-year-old roommate. I don't blame him. So that was it. I was like constantly looking for apartments, constantly getting, we'll call you, and never getting the call back. And I wasn't willing to take a regular apartment, which would have solved everything. So again, in hindsight, it's very easy to look at like, well, why didn't I just do this or that? What ended up happening is that the job that I was doing, I didn't like. It was doing a Warner Brothers game for the Dreamcast, and it wasn't something that I really enjoyed. And meanwhile, like I'm frustrated because the job that I really wanted to be doing was in Sydney, but I didn't take that job. A lot of the times in the beginning, I was staying back at night because I had a Wacom there, so I'm doing matte painting because I loved doing matte painting back then, and I was doing a lot of effects. So I was just doing all the things that I really wanted to be doing, rather than the things that I was doing for my day job. Now, again, this is where it's important, I think, for you to write this down too, is that if you're not doing what you find fulfilling in your day job, then you're typically going to be spending all of your free time trying to get that fulfillment outside, finding the thing that you're passionate about and doing that in your spare time. So it's always better to be doing the thing that you care about, because then you'll get that fulfillment in your day job, and when you leave at night, you feel that fulfillment. You feel good, and you're able to go and relax and enjoy life. So for me, being frustrated and not enjoying that job, it meant that in my spare time I was just doing all the stuff that I really enjoyed doing and wished I was doing. So I think that's just important for all of us to really concrete down that we need that fulfillment in what we do. At the same time, I was learning Softamarche 3.7 Extreme on the SGI, and that was a bit of a learning curve, but mainly just because my heart wasn't in it. I wasn't learning, I wasn't applying myself. Now, again, if you're passionate about something, then you're addicted to it. You just want to keep consuming it over and over and over. All your free time, like everything you're doing, you're learning because this excites you. If it's something that doesn't excite you, then you're not going to apply yourself. You're going to be sitting there dozing off. Like I tried, there's a subject recently I was trying to get into, and I'm like 2 or 3 hours went by. I had gone through like 10 minutes of like a training video. I'm just like, this is killing me. I cannot sit still. Like I'm so bored out of my mind. But if it's something that you love, like, you know, I've been to conferences where I'm literally filling up an entire notebook, like a thick notebook with notes, because like everything is so inspiring and I'm enjoying it so much. So again, like you got to be doing something that you find you're passionate about, and then it becomes easy. But otherwise you're fighting yourself. The guy, I've forgotten his name, but the doctor who came up with the 10,000 hours rule, that was actually something he talked about. He had a test where he raised his 3 daughters to become chess champions, all 3 of them. And it was about doing something for 10,000 hours is how long it takes to become an expert at something. But he also said that you need to love what you do. Otherwise, you know, no matter how much time you put into it, you'll never be able to master it. And I think that is very critical here as well. So long story short, I ended up looking for apartments in my spare time. So like on lunch breaks, I'd be going and looking at all these apartments. I'd be coming back to work late because I was looking at apartments. I'd be leaving early to go look at apartments. So suddenly everything, like my job is starting to fuck up because I'm not applying myself. I'm kind of struggling to learn. And on top of that, I'm leaving all the time to look for apartments and no one's giving me a break. Now, with my Studio Catastrophic, I've probably relocated maybe 10 people. It hasn't been that many. Typically, it would either be online or local talent. And so there's only been a few people who've had to relocate, but that's the number one thing I've always communicated to them, was to get yourself situated right away. And I think that was because of the experiences that I went through, where my work was suffering because I'm trying to deal with all the life shit of getting electricity on or getting an apartment or whatever it might be, that kind of stuff that can get in your way. In my case, it was trying to find an apartment. I'm letting my job fall apart because I'm not really actively applying myself at the job because I'm looking for apartments all the time. So that ended up really screwing things up. Meanwhile, with the home situation, I'd be sleeping on that guy's couch, and the roommate was just like, I want him out, I want him out, I want him out. And so they'd given me until I think like Thursday or Friday to find, like to get all my stuff and leave. So I remember the day that this happened. I was 16 years old, went into work, and I'd basically been told that afternoon I got to collect my stuff and I'm gonna have to leave the place. And here I am, again, 16. It's a different situation, but I didn't really know where to stay because getting a hotel didn't seem like an option. Plus, I didn't have the money. And it was just kind of like, all right, I got to deal with this problem when I go to get my suitcase. But then that afternoon, I remember management. I still remember the guy's name who came in. And he's like, let's go for a walk. And I remember saying to him in the hallway, is everything okay? And that's because I could tell that it wasn't okay. And I remember him putting his hand on my shoulder and saying, we're going to have to let you go. And that's where I went upstairs for an exit interview and did all that. So being 16, like I'll segue for a second to say that I've talked about this before, that we have our key foundations, right? These are the things that in our life, you, me, everyone, we have, which is having a home, having money, having someone to love, having a job. All of these are our core foundations. I think there's 5. I'm just spacing on the last one. But these are our core foundations, having a purpose. These are the things that are really important for all of us. If any of those are not in check, if one of those is neglected, it can really rock the boat. It can really affect us. So if we lose our job, if we lose our home, if we break up with someone, if we lose our money, any of those will completely disrupt your entire life. And for me, at that one moment, I had, I think, 3 of them kind of taken away. I had my money taken away. I didn't have any money. I had my place where I was staying, my security, in other words, taken away. My job taken away. So all of that in a split moment, completely in that one day, completely affected everything. So I remember leaving that building and not really knowing what I was going to do. Here I am on the other side of the country, which at 16 years old, not knowing anyone at all in Melbourne, it was really scary, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. I didn't know where I was going to be sleeping that night. And I remember leaving the building and going to catch the train back to get my bags. And I remember going into the house, and no one was there. They were purposely not there so I could get my stuff and I could leave without them, feeling bad. And I think there's probably been 3, maybe 4 times in my life as an adult I've cried. And I was 16, but that was one of them. I remember sitting down with my suitcases on the couch and just completely bawling my eyes out because I didn't know when I left the house. I didn't know where I was going to go. I didn't know where I was going to sleep that night. I didn't know where I was going to sleep the rest of the time. I didn't know how I could even get home because I didn't have money. And I didn't come from a family that had money. I had one rich uncle which I actually borrowed $1,200 from to get to Melbourne. And so that's why my mom and I always paid rent. It's that's all we could afford. It's from 14, I had to pay rent. I had to pay bills just like an adult. So this meant that it was on me. And it meant that I had to figure out what the hell I was going to do. And I remember that night I stayed at a train station. I didn't sleep, literally sat there the entire night just to figure out what the hell I'm going to do. I still had a bit of money, but it was $200 or something, which, isn't enough to get a flight home, isn't enough for so I ended up spending the day in the park. I bought Rolling Stone magazine, a can of Coke, and I don't know, some food, probably a sandwich or something, but I just sat in a park all day just trying to, with my suitcases, trying to figure out what the hell I'm going to do, and using a public payphone to call my mom and the 2 of us trying to strategize of how the hell I can get back across the country. And as an adult, I can think of 1,000 things I could have done, but as a naive young kid, that was all new to me. I'd never been on a plane before. I'd never left home before. I never lived on my own before, any of these things. So it was a whole new concept. I didn't really have the right people around me to give me the advice that I could probably give myself now. But that being said, that went on for about 3 or 4 days. So I didn't have any money. I barely slept that week. I just stayed anywhere that was public. And at the same time, I'd lost my job. I'd lost everything. And I finally got home, and, that really fucked me up for a good 6 months. So as I mentioned, when you have your core foundations and any of those are taken, it can screw you up. For me, this totally messed me up. There was a good 6 months where every night I'd be having nightmares where I was trapped in another country, or I was trapped on one side of the river and I couldn't get home on the other side of the river. Everything was related back to, essentially being helpless and not able to get back to safety. And that's something that just kind of completely messed me up in a way, having all that taken away. At the same time, I can look back even then and realize that my heart wasn't really in it. The good thing was, and this is something I haven't mentioned yet, but the good thing was, as I left the building, I called the place in Sydney that I'd always wanted to work for, and I just told them look, that the job didn't really work out. And I think that this is important too. I've only been fired ever once, but so I'm not a pro on this, but I think for anyone who's ever hey, how do I say to an employer I got fired from my job or I lost my job or whatever, I think it happens enough that it's not that big a deal. It's not you're untouchable. So for me, all I said was hey, that other job, it didn't really quite work out how I expected. And that was it. It wasn't oh, what happened and let's get into it all. So within, that day I'd already spoken and lined up a job, but at the time it was really reassuring to know that something was lined up. Just unfortunately, the big project, it was a riot or something, had fallen through, so I didn't take it right away. Whole point is, just to get back on track with this, is it was reassuring to always have options. But I think that in hindsight, and this applies to you, it applies to me, if you're ever going to do anything that requires like a big detrimental shift in your lifestyle, let's say moving to another city to take a job, have contingency plans in place. Okay, for me, I didn't really have any options, but at least knowing that there was a job lined up somewhere else is reassuring. But more importantly, I'm saying this from witnessing so many other people be in much worse situations as grown adults, where they move to LA expecting to find a job the next day and they run out of money and they become homeless. Like, this shit happens. And the thing is that if you start to think about, well, what's the worst that can happen, and then plan for that, then suddenly when bad things happen, it's just a matter of segueing into the next step. So instead of being like, oh my God, this bad thing happened, it's like, all right, well, I planned for this, so I'm going to do this. And you know exactly what to do, all these contingencies lined up. So the more that you plan ahead, the more that you're smart about it, the more that you can line up jobs and set yourself up for success, even in the worst case scenario. And I can't stress that enough, because again, I see people who get themselves into really dumb situations, but it's because they didn't think ahead. So when it happens, they're freaking out because they don't know what to do. Instead of knowing that that's a possibility and being able to set yourself up for success to work around that. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that resonates to some degree about having plans in place. And also means the more that you know that things could go wrong, the more that you can say, well, how do I prevent that? So for me, looking back, there's 1,000 things I could have done, but one is get myself situated right away. And being 16, again, as an adult, I can think about this a bit more clearly, but roommates are probably not an option. Most people are not going to want to have a little kid as a roommate. So, knowing that that's a thing, I could easily just go and find an apartment, get a cheap piece of shit studio apartment somewhere, and then that's taken care of. Knowing that, I got to line myself up for success in the beginning means about getting the wins in the beginning. Just all of these simple things that are so obvious now, but this is what matters, is about when you relocate to a new place, when you take a new job, it's all about securing yourself. So as I mentioned, getting back home, I ended up taking a job as a lecturer at university for about a year. It was an interesting experience. I helped build the first curriculum for video game development in Australia, the Bachelor of Interactive Entertainment. It's a bit of a mouthful. And, I had a lot of good experiences from it. I eventually moved to Sydney and took that job that I always wanted. And that, to this day, is probably the most impactful job I ever had. And I regret not taking it on sooner. So I already mentioned this, but to reiterate, think of the invisible scripts that you're using to sabotage your life. So in other words, there are going to be times where you have the perfect opportunity, like me going to Sydney to go work at the studio that changed my life, and it could have happened so much sooner without all the drama and shit that fucked me up, And I didn't allow it to happen because I knew someone in a further away city who had a couch I could sleep on, which, ended up being a bad situation. So this stupid thing of I took a job I didn't want, I went to a city that I didn't really want to go to at the time, love Melbourne, and all of these things, I turned down the job that I really want because of some stupid excuse that I made. And I want you to think about that, about how many times that you might not even catch yourself doing it, but you make an excuse. You say, well, I could go and have all the success and do all these things, but I don't have time, or I don't do this, or whatever it is. We make these excuses to not try, or to choose the easier path rather than the right path. And I think that is really important for all of us to really consider while we're making these decisions. Now, the only reason that I mention all this, because I've mentioned before that there's been times like this that had kind of fucked me up and played a big part in my life. And for me, I was homeless, I think, for 3 or 4, I think it was 4 days total. And it wasn't bad. It just, it wasn't something that I could continue doing. And I'm glad that I managed to finally negotiate. I had a plane ticket that originally they wouldn't let me use, but it was for Christmas time, and I'm a return ticket. And they, through a lot of begging between my mom and myself with the airline, they eventually let me use that ticket now and fly home. And it's the only way I got home because I had no money and no one who could give me money. Now, the reason I bring this up, okay, because it isn't a pity party. I don't think it, for me, looking back and be like, oh, you're homeless for 4 days and you got fired the same day, like that sucks. But it's not something that I think is that big a deal. Me being 16 and naive, like it definitely played a big part. But what I did is I took this negative experience, this thing that did fuck me up. I had nightmares. It really made me worry about everything, about like when it's all going to cave in on me. And I think in some ways I still have that a little bit. I always feel things are temporary. I think it's just because I travel too much. But here's the thing. In the end, I took that negative thing and I made it a strength. Because every time I went to a job moving forward, rather than having the big surprise of Russell putting his hand on my shoulder and saying, we're going to have to let you go, and feeling in that one moment, just everything, the house, everything just kind of get taken away, I never wanted to experience that again. And because of that, it meant that every single job, I would make sure that I'm killing it. I would make sure to check in with my bosses. And this is something I did. Like, I got laughed at occasionally because people were like, you're not getting fired or anything. Because I wouldn't say it, but like I would be saying like, hey, I just want to check in and see how I'm doing. Is there anything I can be doing better? I didn't want there to be a surprise that crept up on me, where one day someone says like, we're going to have to let you go. Same thing with my roommates or, where I lived and things like that. Like, I wanted to make sure that my foundations were all intact. And I think for all of us, it's so critical. So for me, it meant that every job I did for years, I would always make sure to check in, make sure I'm doing a good job, see what else I could be doing, get a vibe for like how they feel about me, because I didn't want any unexpected things to pop up. But it also meant that I could prevent anything from ever popping up. But it meant that having felt something that kind of shook my core so much, it meant that I would never let that ever happen again. And it meant that that became a strength for me. It meant that I would always protect myself, and I would always look at that as, I don't want to go back there. I don't want to be in that situation. Therefore, I'm going to fucking nail this shit as much as I can, because I refuse to ever have that shit creep up on me again. So I want you to think of the negative things that you've experienced, the things that maybe you did get fired, maybe you had whatever it would be, okay? Like, whatever bad situations may happen in your life, to look at those as strengths, look at those as, that is the worst case result, and I'm not fucking doing that again. So I'm going to do what I can to ensure that it never happens. So you go into prevention instead and use that as a strength, use it as a weapon to ensure that if this happened, how do I prevent it next time? And ensure, keep checking in, keep knowing your surroundings, and don't ever let there be surprises that come up by being more aware of the lay of the land, right? So that, I think, is the main core thing I wanted to get. Like, I've had a lot of people ask me over the years about this, and I don't want to get into it. And like I said, for me, it's more of the core feelings that I felt being 16 and lost with, no idea of how to get back to my happy place. That was what was bad about it. Me as an adult, I look back and I'm like, 16-year-old Allan, crybaby, I could done this, and this, but it's not about that. But the core thing that I really want you to take away is find a thing you're passionate about, because it'll all fall into place, because you'll be addicted to what you're doing. But at the same time, if you're taking on a new job or anything like that, look at getting yourself situated, get all the life shit out of the way so you can focus on your job, because your job is what's important. For me, I look back at that negative thing that happened, and it meant that it would never happen again. I know that I would never get fired ever again. I know that I would never be homeless ever again. I know that I would never allow any of this stuff to ever happen in my entire life, because I've experienced it once and I never want to experience it again. And I felt so vulnerable then that, it shook me to my core enough that I will always take charge and I'll always take responsibility, and I'll always make sure that there's never the hand on the shoulder saying we got to let you go. And that to me has become a strength. It's become a weapon that I can use to prevent bad shit from ever happening again. So look at the things that cripple you and look at that as fuel to make sure that you never allow that to ever happen again. I hope this makes sense. I know that it won't for everyone, but I'm hoping for some of you, it might allow me to connect with you a little bit about why I do what I do, and sometimes why I am going to think about the contingencies. I'm going to think about ways to prevent bad shit from happening. I'm going to think about all of that because I don't want to allow the bad shit to happen. And as long as I know anything that can happen, it allows me to be in control and prevent it from ever happening. And I can use that fuel of saying never again to allow me to succeed and allow me to push forward and not have those unexpected surprises pop up from time to time. So I hope for a few of you, this really resonates. The rest of you, maybe this isn't for you. But maybe down the line, this is something that will echo in your mind when you are going through some hard times and you're thinking about what you can do. Use that fuel. Use it as fuel to stand up and to prevent the bad shit from happening ever again.